Unbecoming of Elanor Lake. Part 1. The Solitude of Whispering Pines. The city had become a cacophony of pressure, a relentless grind of deadlines, footsteps on pavement, and the low, anxious hum that seemed to emanate from the very walls of the university library. For Elanor, a doctoral candidate in post-structuralist literature, the world had shrunk to the suffocating confines of theory and critique. Her thesis, a sprawling deconstruction of identity in postmodern narratives, had begun to deconstruct her own. Words blurred, ideas soured, and the reflection that stared back from her darkened monitor screen looked increasingly like a stranger, hollowed out, haunted by the ghost of a deadline. It was this profound sense of unraveling that drove her to Blackwood Lake. The family house wasn't just a retreat. It was a psychological anchor, a place tethered to a more solid, tangible version of herself. Built by her great-grandfather, its pine logs had absorbed the scent of a century's worth of wood smoke, damp wool, and her grandmother's lavender sachets. Its foundation of riverstone was a testament to permanence in a world that felt increasingly fluid and uncertain. Driving the winding, tree-canopied road, she felt the city's grip loosen with every mile. The air itself changed, growing heavy and cool, thick with the smell of damp earth, pine needles, and the deep, metallic scent of the lake. When she finally arrived, the house stood silhouetted against a bruised twilight sky. It didn't look welcoming so much as patient, an old, knowing entity that had been waiting for her. The first few days were a blissful return to self. She rediscovered the simple, grounding rhythms of the house, the specific groan of the third step on the staircase, the way the morning light caught in the bubbled glass of the kitchen windows, the woody aroma of coffee brewing in the old percolator. She established a new routine, studying for hours at the immense oak desk her great-grandfather had built, its surface scarred with the history of forgotten projects and spilled ink. The desk faced a grand picture window, a proscenium arch for the ceaseless, silent drama of Blackwood Lake. The lake was the heart of the place. By day, it could be a sheet of hammered silver under the sun, but its true nature was revealed at dusk. The water, stained by tannins from the surrounding pine forests, would darken to an opaque, unnerving black. Locals had their stories, of course, folkloric whispers of a lake without a bottom, of a place that held on to things. Elanor had always dismissed them as charming rural myths. The change began on the fourth night, so subtly she almost didn't notice it. A feeling. As she sat reading, the silence of the house seemed to deepen, to become heavier, as if the air itself had grown dense with an unspoken presence. It was then, as the ancient grandfather clock in the hall began to chime its 12 mournful notes, that her phone vibrated with a startling violence against the desk. Unknown number. She silenced it, a knot of inexplicable anxiety tightening in her stomach. It was nothing, she told herself, a simple misdial. But the spell of her sanctuary was broken. Every creak of the old house was suddenly suspect. The wind, which had earlier seemed to sing through the eaves, now sounded like a low, persistent whisper, just beyond the range of comprehension. She found herself glancing at the great dark window, half expecting to see a face pressed against the glass. The next night, the call came again, a perfectly punctual assault on the midnight calm. This time she answered, determined to dispel the growing dread. "Hello?" The sound that met her was not silence, but a textured void. It was a low hiss of static, the sound of a radio tuned between stations. But woven deep within it, almost subliminal, was something else. A faint, wet, rhythmic sound, like air being drawn slowly through water, and a whisper. It was formless, genderless, a mere rustle of sound, but she felt it in her bones. It was the shape of her own name, Elanor. She slammed the phone down, her hand trembling, her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. She was imagining it. She had to be. The stress of her thesis, the profound isolation, it was a recipe for paranoia. But the nightly ritual was now set in stone. At the stroke of 12, a new number would appear, and she would be treated to the same oral nightmare. The hiss, the submerged breathing, and the ghost of her name whispered from an impossible distance. She stopped answering, but that was worse. The silent, vibrating phone on her desk felt like a coiled snake, a palpable threat in the darkness. Her days became as haunted as her nights. The forest, once a place of solace, now felt menacing. The towering pines seemed to lean in, their branches like grasping fingers, their shadowed depths holding secrets she did not wish to uncover. She felt a constant, prickling sensation on the back of her neck, the undeniable feeling of being watched. Once, while walking a familiar trail, she found a small, perfectly arranged circle of smooth, gray stones in the middle of the path. They hadn't been there the day before. It was a small thing, a childish prank perhaps, but it felt like a message, a marker. The reflections became her personal torment. She began to actively avoid them, turning mirrors to the wall, drinking from opaque mugs instead of glasses. But they were unavoidable. A glimpse in a darkened window pane, in the chrome of a faucet, in the glossy cover of a book. Each time, for a fraction of a second, her own face would look back at her with a chilling placidity, an expression of utter calm that was the antithesis of the frantic terror she felt inside. The reflection's eyes seemed to say, "There, there. Soon it will all be over." Part 2. The Invasion of the Self. The breaking of her solitude was not a relief, but an escalation. The entity was no longer content to haunt the edges of her perception. It began to actively rewrite her reality. It started with her parents. During a strained video call, they seemed distant, their smiles not quite reaching their eyes. "We're just so proud of the new direction you're taking with your thesis, honey," her mother said, her voice bright and brittle. Elanor frowned. "New direction? I haven't changed anything." "Don't be modest," her father chuckled, but there was no mirth in the sound. "You told us on the phone." Abandoning all that depressing French theory for a more grounded historical approach. It's a much more sensible path. I never said that," Elanor stammered. "I haven't even spoken to you since Tuesday." The look they shared was a physical blow, a quick shared glance of pity and deep concern. They thought she was losing her mind. She tried to argue, to explain, but her frantic denials only seemed to solidify their conviction. She was the unreliable narrator of her own life. The attacks grew more personal, more intimate. Small objects in the house would move. A silver locket her grandmother had given her, always kept in a velvet-lined box, appeared on the mantelpiece. A volume of Baudelaire from her desk was found lying open on the damp ground by the lakeshore, its pages warped and ruined. Each instance was accompanied by a phantom explanation from her parents. You told us you wanted to keep the locket out to remember her. Or you said you were taking your books outside to read. Desperate, she reached out to Chloe, her best friend, the one person who had always been her anchor. She poured everything out in a breathless, rambling phone call. The midnight calls, the misplaced objects, the terrifying conversations with her parents. Chloe listened patiently, her silence a comforting presence. "Okay, Elle," she said finally, her voice steady. "This is seriously freaking me out. It sounds like you're being gaslit on a terrifying level. Maybe you should pack up and come home. Screw the midterms." Tears of relief streamed down Eleanor's face. "You believe me?" "Of course I believe you," Chloe said fiercely. "Something is wrong. Just promise me you'll be careful." That night, for the first time in over a week, Elanor felt a sliver of hope. She wasn't insane. Chloe was her proof. She fell into a deep, exhausted sleep, only to be jolted awake hours later by a notification on her phone. It was an email from Chloe, sent at 3 a.m. The subject line was one word: goodbye. Her hands shaking, Elanor opened it. The message was a wall of text, cold and clinical. It detailed every insecurity Elanor had ever confessed to Chloe in moments of drunken vulnerability. Her fear of academic failure, her envy of Chloe's seemingly effortless social life, her secret belief that she was fundamentally unlovable. The email twisted these confessions into accusations, painting Elanor as a toxic, manipulative friend. It ended with a chilling finality. "The person I thought you were is gone. I hope you get help, but I can't be a part of your life anymore." Elanor knew with a soul-crushing certainty that she had not sent this. Her laptop was closed. Her phone had been on the nightstand. The entity had reached beyond the house, beyond the lake, and severed her last connection to the world she knew. It had used her own fears as a weapon against her. The weekend dinner at her parents' home was the final act of her erasure. She walked in to find them sitting in the living room, their faces grim. They didn't hug her. "We need to talk," her father said, his voice flat. They confronted her with a list of grievances so surreal, so monstrous, she felt like she was dissociating. They spoke of cruel phone calls, of accusations she had supposedly leveled against them, of a plan she had allegedly confessed: to sell the lake house, which she had called a suffocating monument to a dead past. "And your poor great-aunt," her mother whispered, her eyes filled with a genuine, heartbreaking sorrow. To say she was mentally unstable, to dismiss her memory like that. "Elanor, what has happened to you?" Elanor stared at them, the truth a useless, silent scream in her throat. The doppelgänger hadn't just impersonated her. It had studied her. It had learned her family's pressure points, its sacred histories, and it had systematically desecrated them. It was building a new Elanor on the ashes of the old one, and her parents, her own loving parents, were embracing the changeling without question. They didn't want the anxious, struggling daughter. They wanted the confident, ruthless one. Part 3. The Unbecoming. She drove back to the lake in a daze, the world outside her car a meaningless blur. The house was no longer a home. It was a tomb, a stage set for her own disappearance. But she was not going to be a ghost. A cold, hard fury began to replace the terror. It was the anger of a cornered animal. This creature had stolen her voice, her friendships, her family. It would not steal her life. Remembering her great-aunt's journal, she tore through the attic, her movements frantic. She found the small, cloth-bound book and read the entries again. this time not with fear, but with the focused intensity of a scholar. The townsfolk called it the Echo of Blackwood. It found the lonely. It offered a replacement. But one line she had skimmed over before now leaped out at her. They say it cannot create, it can only reflect. It is made of our own shadows, our own hidden wishes. To unmake it, one must accept the reflection. What did it mean? To accept the creature that was destroying her? The idea was madness. Yet, it was the only clue she had. That night, she did not wait inside. She walked down to the dock as the moon, pale and heavy, climbed the sky. The lake was a vast, silent expanse of black glass. She held her great-aunt's journal in her hand, its worn cover a fragile shield. As the first midnight chime echoed from the house, the water before her began to ripple, not with a splash, but with a slow, thick bulge, as if something were pushing up from below. The doppelgänger rose from the depths, its clothes immaculate, its hair dry, its eyes shining with cold amusement in the moonlight. "Come to surrender?" it asked, its voice a symphony of self-assurance. "I came to understand," Elanor said, her own voice surprisingly steady. "You're made of my fears, aren't you? My ambition, my envy, every dark thought I've ever pushed away." The doppelgänger's smile widened. "Clever girl. You think that gives you power over me? I am everything you are, but better. I am the version of you that succeeds, that takes what she wants without apology. I am the Elanor they will all love." It stepped onto the dock, its presence a vortex of cold energy. "Your parents are already happier. They have a daughter who is decisive and strong. Chloe will forgive me, the new me, because I will be the magnetic, confident friend she always secretly wanted. I will finish your thesis, and it will be lauded as brilliant. I will live your life, but I will not make your mistakes." It was a devastatingly perfect argument. The creature was offering a better product. And in that moment, Elanor understood what her great-aunt meant. To fight it was to fight herself, to deny the parts of her that were weak and afraid, the very parts that gave the doppelgänger its power. To unmake it, she had to accept the reflection. "You're right," Elanor said softly. The doppelgänger paused, its triumphant expression faltering with confusion. Elanor took a step forward, her eyes locked on its cold, identical ones. "You're right. I am afraid of failing. I am envious. I am weak sometimes." She took another step. "And that's okay. All of that is me, the fear and the strength, the doubt and the ambition. You are not the better me. You are just the edited version, the easy version." For the first time, a flicker of something other than confidence crossed the doppelgänger's face. It was uncertainty. It had been born from Eleanor's self-rejection, and it could not comprehend her self-acceptance. "You are just a shadow," Elanor whispered, now standing directly before it, "and I am not afraid of my own shadow anymore." She reached out, not to strike, but to touch. As her fingertips made contact with the doppelgänger's shoulder, it recoiled with a shriek that was a discordant echo of her own voice. Its form began to waver, to lose its perfect solidity, like a reflection in disturbed water. It flickered between her image and a swirling column of shadow and lake water. "No!" it hissed, its voice losing its clarity. "They want me. They want their daughter," Elanor said, tears finally falling, tears of grief and of release. "And you are not her." She did not push. She simply held her ground as the doppelgänger, in its panic, lunged at her. But instead of a collision, it was an absorption. The creature of shadow and water passed through her. a rush of glacial cold and overwhelming emotion, a torrent of all her repressed fears and desires flooding her at once. She gasped, falling to her knees, inundated by the sheer force of her own reclaimed darkness. She knelt there for a long time, the empty dock groaning softly beneath her. The moon watched, impassive. When she finally rose, she felt whole. The anxious hum in her mind was gone, replaced by a quiet, profound stillness. She was herself entirely. She walked back to the house, leaving the silent, waiting lake behind. She knew it would not be easy. She had a life to reclaim, relationships to mend, a truth so bizarre she might never be able to fully explain it. But as she stepped into the warm, familiar light of the house, she looked at her reflection in the dark glass of the window, and for the first time in weeks, the face that looked back was unequivocally, completely her own.